Hello, and thanks for clicking on the video. This will be part 2 of the Field Training Officer program, and I'm going to cover a few things, what to expect during the training program. But before I get started, I'm going to tell you a few stories to kind of reinforce something that I want you to stay on with your focus on. The first one is some years ago, after I left law enforcement, I was on patrol as a reserve officer, and I was in the booking area. And there were 2 other officers there. One was processing paperwork, and then the other one was bringing in a prisoner. And I was waiting for my turn with my own prisoner. We had a holding facility at the department I was working with as a reserve officer while I worked as a college professor. And the second officer that came in, he dug into the suspect's pocket when he was doing the property inventory, and all the suspect had in his pocket was a penny. 1 cent, 1 penny. And so the second officer that walked in asked the first officer that was doing the paperwork, hey, this guy only has a penny. Should I fill out a property form for this 1 penny? And the first officer, who knew me for many years, says, he pointed towards me and he's like, why didn't you ask him? He's the veteran officer here. And so I looked at him and said, well, the last time I checked, that a penny is still property, and that particular penny does not belong to you, it belongs to him. And so the officer had to fill out the form. And so in another situation I'll share with you, I had a long shift and I worked overtime. And then after the patrol shift, I had to put in overtime, finish my reports. And I went into the watch commander's office, and because he had a couple of questions on a case that I handled, and he wanted me to sign a form, and he let me borrow his pen. I signed the form, and then I walked out of his office, and then I had court the next day, so I basically got in my car, and I drove home. It was probably 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:30, and I was halfway home. And I realized that I had the watch commander's pen still with me. It was in my uniform. I had put it on my uniform pocket next to my other pens. And so I realized I had his pen. And so I made a U-turn. And at almost 3 o'clock in the morning, now mind you, I had started like at 6 a.m., going to court, went patrol. I was really tired, hadn't had overtime. This is 3 o'clock in the morning. And I drove back to the department to give him back his pen. And so these 2 situations hopefully rattle your brain to think that when you become a peace officer, when you become a public servant, when you enter a field training officer program, you have to realize that you have to do everything as accurately as possible, as ethically as possible. You have to follow department policy. You cannot take shortcuts. This is not a time to make mistakes. And so keep those 2 incidents in mind and you'll do fine. So let's get started on talking about a few things. First of all, thanks for the comments. Some of you have commented on the how these tips are helping you, and they will help you in the long run. And I hope that that more of you are going to become successful by listening to these tips. So Field Training Officer Program, I mentioned on my first video that you leave the station and they don't want you to come back, so make sure you have the right forms, make sure you have the right equipment, and so forth. At the beginning of the shift, after you go through briefing, now you're in briefing, they're going to be telling you all about what happened the previous 2 or 3 shifts. If you're coming off of days off, you should really brief yourself on what's been happening, bank robberies, organized crime hitting your city, you name it, so that you become familiar with what they're looking for. But after you go through briefing, you carry all of your equipment out to the patrol car, and these are very important moments. This is where you should not be having distractions. For example, if you're working swing shift or graveyard shift or pretty much any shift, but those first 2 shifts, you have to have a flashlight, a very bright flashlight. Not having a flashlight when you work swing shift or graveyard is extremely dangerous. So before you head out to your car after briefing, you check your equipment, and you make sure that for sure you have, I had to make a left over my shoulder look. I was merging into a road here. Make sure that you have your flashlight. Then you get out to your car. I always carried a spare battery to my flashlight. My flashlight was a mag light. It was rechargeable, and I always carried the flashlight, very powerful light, and the mag light recharger battery, so that I was ready for everything, right? Anything. And then once you get out the patrol car, you got to check in the patrol car. And I want to spend a few minutes talking to you about some critical things. Number one is that as soon as you get to the car, you open your trunk, you open the back door, you put your items in the trunk, your police bag, everything else, and you put what goes in the front. You know, like I always had a second gun in the front, a spare gun. I had the extra magazines, and I had my flashlight when I was training someone. So the rest of the stuff went in the trunk. And so when you do this, you turn on the car, you turn on all your emergency lights. You have your full rotators, your strobes, everything going on, and you're gonna check your everything, your air horn, your flash, your backlights. You get out, our ambers are on, yes. You turn on to the first click, you come to the front of the car, you look, are your steady red and blue, are they on? And obviously if they're on, then you move to the next click, and now the next click is all the light bar is on. So this is where you check to make sure that that steady red is there, because in California, for example, a police officer must have a steady red light in front of his or her patrol car before making a traffic stop. So if you didn't do this checkout process at the beginning of the shift, you're gonna have an issue later on when you go to court. Okay, so you check your spotlights, you check your takedown light, which is, you know, if you don't have somebody in the car with you, your spotlight on the right is on a remote switch. You want to make sure that remote switch is working. You check out the blackout. We have a blackout switch in the patrol cars, where when you go into a burglary in progress, for example, you go on stealth mode and you'll black out all the patrol car lights. And so that's important. And then you start going through the other stuff, right? You check your horn, you check your turn signals, you turn on your lights, make sure your headlights are all on. Police cars do get headlights that burn out, and so you have to make sure that your lights are all on. Now, once that's done, you have to begin a thorough process on searching the patrol car. I'm talking about, you have to really check to see if the last officer or the last suspect that was in your car left any type of contraband in the patrol car. So you get on a mission to really dig through that patrol car. You check under both drivers and passenger seats, you check under the middle console area, and you check back there to make sure that there is absolutely nothing that was left over in the back from the previous shift inside of your patrol car. And this is where you basically, you can now testify once you go to court that you have searched the patrol car thoroughly, and that there was no contraband in the car when you started your shift. Okay? This is very important. No contraband in your car when you started the shift. And so that's the first steps. Now, the other things, once you check this out, everything is clear on the, there's no lights out, everything's working, everything's good, then there's no contraband in the car, then we're gonna move to weapons. Last agency I worked for, I had an AR-15 assault rifle in the car, and then I also had the Remington 870 shotgun. So you're gonna check those out. You wanna make sure that there's not one in a chamber in that shotgun. You're gonna completely empty it, take all the cartridges out, and then make sure that you pull the switch, that there's nothing. Once there's nothing in the gun, pull the switch, and then load 5 in the chamber. And in some departments, you have extra rounds that go in the shotgun along the barrel. Now the AR-15, check to make sure that it's not loaded. Make sure that it's loaded with a full clip. I always carried an additional clip just in case. And that's the beginning of the patrol shift. Now put your guns back into the holders. Make sure that they're locked in place. And then get out of your patrol car and do a couple of walk-arounds to find out if there are any things like bald tires, nails in your tire, anything dripping from the car, any fluids. Now, mind you, this is going to take probably 10-15 minutes. And I know there's calls going to be holding, but you got to make sure that you go through this process very thoroughly. Once your field training officer walks out from the department, maybe he comes out with a bag of popcorn or some snacks, he walks up to you, the trainee, and he says, hey, have you checked everything in the patrol car? Do the lights work? Yes, sir, it does. Or yes, ma'am, whoever your training officer is. You checked the guns? Yes, I did. Do the spotlights work? Yes. Do you have a flashlight? Yes. Is there any contraband in the car? No. Okay, we ready? Yes. You get in the computer, you enter your login code and name and code, and now you're live. And this is where it all starts. And so I'm going to stop here and give you some time to process what I just said, because what I just said the past 10 minutes is what you're going to repeat every patrol shift for your entire career. Okay, when you're on patrol, that's what you're going to repeat during the field training officer program. There is no excuses not to do it. Now, are there going to be days that you have to run to the patrol car because there's a robbery in progress, there's a bank robbery in progress, there's a rape in progress? Yes. Those days that you do not have time to check contraband in the back seats and you have to hurry up to the call, and when you get there, if you put somebody in your back seat and then when you take them out, there's contraband, you honestly cannot testify in court that you searched that back seat thoroughly at the beginning of your shift. And so you have to be completely honest, and this is where those two stories that I told you in the beginning of this video come in. You have to be completely honest that no, you did not check your back seat in the beginning of the shift. And if I was your field training officer at that time in the program, I would tell you that it's best to book those drugs into the evidence to be destroyed, because you do not have suspect information as to who those belong to. Now, don't get me wrong, you may suspect the person that you put in the car did in fact take him out of their pocket and put him in the back of your car, but unless you've searched the back seat thoroughly, you cannot honestly testify that that's what happened. And so therefore, they get booked into evidence to be destroyed. There'll be another day, and then hopefully the next day, you don't run out of the department to a call in progress, and you have to, you don't have time to search the car. So in the following videos, I'm gonna pick it up from there. I'm gonna pick it up from here. So make sure you subscribe so that the next time I post a video, you know what the next step of the process is. Field training officer program is extremely important for you to survive in today's law enforcement world. And I know we haven't talked about video cameras, and there's going to be a few things that I'm going to post on here that are going to cover the body cams. Super important for you to listen to it. Even if you receive this video, somebody forwarded to you, and you're already working as a police officer, trust me, when I left law enforcement, I had over 23 years of active law enforcement experience, and you could learn from me because I always followed the book. I was a very active officer. I've been in many dangerous calls, and I think you could learn from what I have to share. So I'm going to cut it off right here before 14 minutes is up. Continue sending the questions, subscribe to the channel, share with others who are trying to maybe going to start the field training officer or have questions. I know I spoke fast, but I got to tell you, when you get into law enforcement, you have to get used to fast-paced, multitasking. It's not a, in the classroom, we're slow, we take our time. But when you get into law enforcement, you have to be, you have to be on guard. You have to be on duty, and you have to be a good listener, and you have to minimize the distractions. So enough advice for now. Yes, I will stop. Look for the next video. We'll pick it up at the very beginning when you log on to your mobile data terminal in the patrol car, and what to expect from that point forward. Thank you for listening, and stay safe, okay? Take care.